Captain Mark Reed of the Galactic Confederation vessel Horizon stared at the blue-green planet on the view screen with a mixture of fascination and dread. Earth, humanity's cradle, and according to all Confederation records, the most dangerous Class 12 death world ever catalogued. Sensors confirm atmospheric composition is primarily nitrogen and oxygen, with trace elements consistent with historical records. Science Officer Tella reported, her silver skin reflecting the console lights. However, the radiation levels and biological diversity readings are unprecedented. Mark nodded grimly. Their mission was straightforward but perilous. Establish first contact with humans after 5 centuries of isolation. The Confederation had quarantined Earth following the Great Plague that had nearly wiped out humanity and threatened to spread to other worlds. Now, with evidence of recovery and technological advancement, the Confederation sought to reconnect. "Any response to our hails?" Mark asked Communications Officer Dorn. "Nothing yet, Captain. But we're detecting thousands of artificial satellites and considerable electromagnetic activity. They definitely have advanced technology." The bridge fell silent as an alert sounded. Security Chief Lara straightened, her muscular frame tense. "Captain, we're being scanned. Multiple targeting systems are locked onto us. Defensive posture only," Mark ordered. "Remember protocol, no aggressive actions." The Confederation's assessment of Earth had always been paradoxical. Humans evolved on a world with crushing gravity, extreme weather patterns, and an ecosystem where virtually everything was either venomous, poisonous, or equipped with natural weapons. Yet this same brutal environment had forged humanity into one of the most adaptable and resilient species in known space. "Incoming transmission," Dorn announced suddenly. The view screen flickered, revealing a stern-faced human woman in a dark uniform adorned with insignia Mark couldn't identify. Her eyes narrowed as she studied them. "This is Admiral Kate Walsh of the Earth Defense Force. You have entered restricted space. Identify yourselves immediately." Mark stepped forward. "I am Captain Mark Reed of the Galactic Confederation vessel Horizon. We come in peace, seeking to re-establish contact with Earth after 5 centuries of separation." Admiral Walsh's expression remained impassive. "Galactic Confederation? We have no records of such an organization." "That's to be expected," Mark replied carefully. "The quarantine was implemented before your current civilization emerged from the aftermath of the Great Plague." "Quarantine?" The Admiral's eyes flashed dangerously. Mark realized his mistake too late. The historical records indicated that from the human perspective, they had been abandoned by their interstellar allies during their darkest hour, not quarantined, for the safety of the galaxy. Before Mark could explain, a proximity alarm blared. Lara's fingers flew across her console. Multiple vessels approaching at high velocity. Their energy signatures indicate weapon systems far more advanced than our intelligence suggested. On the screen, Admiral Walsh's lips curved into a cold smile. "You will power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. We have questions for the Confederation that abandoned us to die." Mark felt a chill run down his spine. The mission briefing had warned that humans might be resentful, but this was open hostility. What had Earth become in its isolation? Had they made a terrible mistake in coming here? "Admiral, there's been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Walsh interrupted, "was yours in thinking you could return to Earth without consequences. You have 30 seconds to comply before we open fire." The first contact with humanity after 5 centuries was not going as planned. It was going much, much worse. Mark raised his hands in a universal gesture of peace. "Admiral Walsh, we will comply, but I urge you to reconsider. We came to share knowledge, not as enemies." Walsh's expression remained stone cold. "Knowledge sharing will indeed occur, Captain, but on our terms." The transmission cut. Around the bridge, Mark's alien crew exchanged nervous glances. Like most Confederation species, they had evolved on gentler worlds than Earth. None possessed the innate physical resilience of humans. "Power down non-essential systems," Mark ordered reluctantly. "Maintain life support and minimal shields." Lara protested. "Captain, our intelligence on human capabilities is clearly outdated. If they board us, then we'll face whatever comes." "Diplomatically," Mark interrupted. "We didn't come here to start a war." Through the view screen, Earth vessels approached, sleek, angular ships that moved with unsettling precision. Their design was unlike anything in Confederation records, suggesting humans had developed technologies independently rather than building on pre-plague foundations. As the Horizon powered down, Mark opened a channel to the ship's AI. Begin emergency. Historical data compilation. If something happens to us, the Confederation needs to know what Earth has become. The boarding was swift and methodical. Armored humans in sealed environmental suits poured into the ship, moving with practiced efficiency that spoke of frequent military operations. Their weapons, compact energy rifles, remained aimed at the crew as they systematically secured each section. A tall male human in a more elaborate suit approached Mark on the bridge. He removed his helmet, revealing sharp features and calculating eyes. Commander Jake Hayes, Earth Special Operations. Your crew will be separated and questioned. Cooperate, and no harm will come to anyone. This treatment violates dozens of Confederation protocols, Mark protested. Hayes smiled thinly. We're not part of your Confederation, Captain. We haven't been for 500 years. The crew was efficiently divided and escorted from the bridge. Mark found himself marched to what appeared to be his own quarters, now converted to an interrogation room. Hours passed as Hayes questioned him relentlessly about Confederation technology, politics, and military capabilities. Mark provided general information while avoiding strategic details, walking a fine line between cooperation and protecting Confederation security. You still don't understand what happened here, do you? Hayes said eventually, leaning back. The historical records indicate a pandemic of unprecedented severity, Mark replied cautiously. Hayes laughed bitterly. A pandemic? Is that what the Confederation calls it? What we experienced was engineered genocide. Mark's blood ran cold. That contradicts all our records. Of course it does. Hayes stood, pacing the small room. When 90% of Earth's population died in less than a year, the Confederation didn't send aid. They established a quarantine and left us to die. Those who survived did so through sheer human stubbornness. The quarantine was to prevent galactic spread, Mark explained. Aid ships were sent, but never arrived, Hayes finished. Convenient. While Earth burned, your Confederation watched from a safe distance. Before Mark could respond, the ship shuddered violently. The lights flickered as emergency sirens blared. Hayes pressed a finger to his earpiece, listening intently. His expression darkened. It seems your Confederation wasn't as peaceful as you claimed, Captain. That's impossible, Mark protested. We came alone. Then explain the 3 heavily armed vessels that just dropped out of faster-than-light travel and are demanding your release, Hayes replied coldly. Either you lied about your mission, or the Confederation sent a backup plan. The ship rocked again with another impact. Mark realized with horror that the situation was spiraling toward interstellar war. Those aren't Confederation ships. We need to return to the bridge immediately. The corridor outside Mark's quarters had transformed into a scene of controlled chaos. Earth soldiers rushed in formation, their movements precise despite the intermittent shuddering of the ship. Take me to the bridge, Mark insisted, grabbing Hayes' arm. Whatever those ships are, they're not ours, but I might recognize them. Hayes hesitated, then nodded sharply. Move! He shoved Mark forward, keeping his weapon trained on the captain's back. When they reached the bridge, Admiral Walsh was already there, studying the main view screen with narrowed eyes. The display showed 3 ominous vessels with distinctive red markings and predatory angular designs. Mark felt his stomach drop. Scavengers. Explain, Walsh demanded, turning to face him. Pirates, essentially. They prey on isolated worlds and ships throughout the sector. They must have followed us, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Hayes' expression hardened. Convenient. Timing. They operate outside Confederation law, Mark explained hurriedly. They've probably been monitoring Earth for years, but your defense systems kept them at bay. Our arrival gave them the distraction they needed. Walsh studied him for a long moment. If you're lying... The ship rocked violently as another impact struck. A communications officer called out, They're demanding we surrender both vessels or they'll destroy us. Let me speak to them, Mark urged. I know their protocols. Walsh's eyes narrowed in calculation before she nodded curtly. Open a channel. But remember, Captain Reed, one wrong word and you'll be the first to die. The view screen flickered, revealing a hulking figure with augmented features, part organic, part mechanical. Even among scavengers, this one appeared unusually modified. Captain Drex, Mark acknowledged, keeping his voice steady. The Horizon is under Confederation protection. The scavenger captain's augmented eye whirred as it focused. Reed, should have known it was you. His voice carried metallic undertones. Protection. I count one Confederation vessel captured by primitives. Poor odds. These primitives destroyed your first salvo with minimal effort, Mark replied, gambling on Earth's defensive capabilities. And you're in violation of sector regulations, Drex laughed, the sound distorted through his mechanical enhancements. Regulations don't reach this far, and we've been watching Earth for decades. Their technology is valuable. Unlike the Confederation, we see potential here. Mark felt Walsh and Hayes studying him with renewed intensity. You've been monitoring Earth? Walsh interrupted. Drex's attention shifted to her, his augmented eye scanning. Admiral Walsh, yes, we've observed your kind rebuild. Impressive, really. Most species would have perished under similar circumstances. The Confederation abandoned Earth during the plague, Mark explained quickly. These scavengers have been exploiting that absence. We prefer opportunists, Drex corrected. And now we have the perfect opportunity, a Confederation vessel, and Earth's flagship in one convenient location. Walsh stepped forward. You've underestimated us before, clearly. That was your first mistake. And your mistake, Drex replied, was dividing your attention between Reed's ship and ours. With that, the transmission cut. Seconds later, the ship's sensors blared warnings. Multiple boarding craft detected. An Earth officer called out. They're targeting both vessels. Walsh turned to Mark, her decision made in an instant. It seems we have a common enemy, Captain Reed. Can your crew fight? Mark nodded. We're explorers first, but all Confederation officers have combat training. Release his crew, Walsh ordered Hayes, and get me a secure channel to Earth Command. We need reinforcements. As the bridge erupted into coordinated activity, Mark realized this unlikely alliance might be their only chance for survival, and possibly the first step toward healing 5 centuries of mistrust. The scavengers breached both ships simultaneously. Their tactics were brutal and efficient. Clearly, they had done this many times before. What they hadn't counted on was the cooperation between the Confederation crew and Earth soldiers. Mark found himself fighting alongside Hayes in the Horizon's main engineering section. The Confederation officer wielded a standard-issue pulse pistol, while Hayes carried what appeared to be a magnetically accelerated projectile weapon of Earth design. 3 o'clock, Hayes called out. Mark pivoted and fired, catching a scavenger. Mid-leap. The pirate's augmented body convulsed as the energy pulse disrupted its systems. Your weapons are effective against their implants, Hayes noted with professional appreciation. And yours have impressive stopping power, Mark replied, watching another scavenger fall to Hayes's weapon. Throughout the ship, similar scenes played out. Science Officer Tella worked with Earth technicians to erect energy barriers at key junctions, while Security Chief Lara coordinated with Earth Marines to establish defensive perimeters. On the bridge, Admiral Walsh received updates from throughout both vessels. They've breached decks 3 through 5 on the Vigilant, she reported grimly, and they're attempting to access your ship's drive core. That's their standard approach, Mark explained, ducking back into the bridge after helping secure a nearby section. They'll try to disable both ships, then strip them for technology and resources. Walsh's eyes narrowed. What's their weakness? Centralized command, Mark replied without hesitation. Scavengers operate on a strict hierarchy. Each boarding party has a sub-commander linked directly to Drex. If we can disrupt those links, we can throw their entire operation into chaos, Walsh finished. She turned to her communications officer. Can we identify and block their command frequencies? The young officer nodded. Working on it, Admiral. Mark studied the tactical display showing both ships. They're focusing more forces on your vessel than mine. They must value Earth technology over Confederation systems. Flattering, Walsh remarked dryly. But it gives us an opportunity. Commander. Hayes, report status. Hayes's voice came through the comm system, punctuated by weapons fire. Engineering secured, Admiral. The aliens fight well for scientists. Mark noticed the subtle shift in Hayes' tone, from dismissive to respectful. It was a small victory amid the larger battle. We need to take the fight to them, Mark suggested. A team could board Drex's command ship while they're focused on capturing ours. Walsh considered this. Bold, possibly suicidal. But unexpected, Mark countered. Scavengers rarely face counterattacks. They're predators, not warriors. A slow smile spread across Walsh's face. I was beginning to think the Confederation had gone soft in our absence, Captain Reed. She activated her comm. Hayes, assemble a joint strike team. You're going hunting. Within 20 minutes, a shuttle carrying 6 Earth soldiers and 4 Confederation officers, including Mark and Lara, launched from the Horizon's secondary bay. As they approached Drex's vessel, Earth's jamming technology proved its worth. The scavengers' automated defenses failed to detect them until they were already attaching to the hull. Impressive tech, Lara commented as an Earth engineer bypassed the scavengers' airlock protocols in seconds. Necessity breeds innovation, the engineer replied. And we've had 5 centuries of necessity. As they breached the scavenger vessel, Mark was struck by how this crisis had accomplished what diplomatic missions never could. Humans and Confederation species working together, their differences temporarily set aside against a common enemy. Command. Center should be 3 levels up, Mark advised as they moved through the dimly lit corridors. Drex will be there, Hayes nodded grimly. Then let's pay the captain a visit. The interior of Drex's vessel resembled a nightmare fusion of organic and mechanical components. Pulsing conduits ran along walls like veins, while neural interfaces flickered with data streams. The air carried the distinct odor of synthetic fluids and ozone. Is this typical scavenger design? Hayes whispered as they moved through a darkened corridor. Mark shook his head. They've integrated technology from at least a dozen species here. Some of it I don't even recognize. An Earth technician, Mason, scanned their surroundings with a compact device. These energy signatures are unlike anything in our database. Some components appear to be self-modifying. Scavengers don't just steal technology, they adapt it, Lara explained quietly. It makes them unpredictable. The team advanced cautiously, encountering surprisingly little resistance. Either the scavengers were overconfident, or most of their forces were committed to the boarding actions. They reached a junction where the corridor split 3 ways. Hayes gestured for the team to halt and turned to Mark. Which way? Before Mark could respond, the lighting shifted to a pulsing red. A voice echoed through hidden speakers, Drex's metallic tones. Captain Reed. Commander Hayes. Did you think my ship wouldn't detect your presence? I've been aware of your little excursion since you departed your shuttle. Hayes signaled the team to defensive positions as Mark replied. Then why let us get this far? Curiosity, Drex answered. Humans and Confederation working together. It's almost historically significant. The abandoned and their abandoners, united against a common threat. We weren't abandoned, Hayes countered, surprising Mark. Captain Reed explained the quarantine protocols. Mark glanced at Hayes, who shrugged slightly. I don't trust you completely, Reed, but I trust him less. A temporary alliance of convenience, Drex observed. It changes nothing. Earth remains isolated, vulnerable despite its impressive adaptations. And the Confederation remains weak, bound by morality and law. The corridor ahead suddenly sealed with a heavy bulkhead. Behind them, another slammed shut. You're trapped, Drex continued, but I'm not without mercy. Surrender, and you'll serve as valuable additions to my crew. Resist, and you'll become spare parts. You have 1 minute to decide. As the voice faded, Mason hurried to a wall panel, scanning it. The entire section is sealed. Atmosphere control has been overridden. He's going to vent the air, Lara realized. Hayes turned to his Earth engineers. Options? One of them, a quiet woman named Patel, stepped forward. These bulkheads operate on a pressure-sensitive mechanism. If we can create a controlled explosion, we'd risk compromising the hull integrity, Lara objected. Patel smiled thinly. Earth vessels drill through kilometers of bedrock. Trust me on explosive engineering. Hayes nodded. Do it. While Patel and another engineer worked, Mark approached Hayes. You said you understood about the quarantine. Hayes checked his weapon, avoiding Mark's gaze. Admiral Walsh received your ship's complete historical logs while we were fighting. 5 centuries of records on Earth, the plague, the quarantine decision. And they match our fragmentary historical data. The Confederation did send aid. Ships. They were destroyed by the same faction that engineered the plague. Mark stared in shock. That wasn't in our records. Because they were classified at the highest levels, Hayes replied grimly. Your council feared panic if the galaxy learned the truth, that someone had deliberately attempted to exterminate humanity. Before Mark could process this revelation, Patel called out, "Charges set, everyone back." The team took cover as a precisely calibrated explosion breached the forward bulkhead. Emergency systems activated, creating a magnetic containment field that prevented atmosphere loss while allowing them passage. Impressive, Lara acknowledged as they moved through the opening. Hayes checked his tactical display. Command center should be 1 level up from here. As they approached their target, Mark couldn't help but wonder what other truths lay buried in 5 centuries of separation, and whether this crisis might finally bridge that divide. The command center of Drex's vessel pulsed with biomechanical energy. Curved view screens displayed both the Horizon and Walsh's ship, the Vigilant, still locked in battle with scavenger boarding parties. At the center stood Drex himself, more machine than organic being, surrounded by subordinates whose bodies displayed varying degrees of technological enhancement. The strike team had positioned themselves in an observation gallery above the main floor. Hayes signaled for silence as they assessed the situation. 7 targets, he whispered. Drex is the one with the red cybernetic eye, Mark nodded. The others are sub-commanders. Take them out and the boarding parties lose coordination. Lara distributed small devices to the team. Electromagnetic pulse generators. They'll disrupt their cybernetics temporarily. Hayes raised an eyebrow. You just happened to bring those along? Standard equipment when dealing with scavengers, she replied with a slight smile. The Earth commander studied the layout below. We'll need to hit them simultaneously. No second chances. They positioned themselves strategically around the gallery's perimeter. Hayes raised 3 fingers, counting down silently. At 0, they activated the pulse generators and dropped to the main floor. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Drex and his officers convulsed as their cybernetic systems malfunctioned. The strike team moved efficiently, securing the scavengers before they could recover. All except Drex. The scavenger captain's systems reset faster than anticipated. He lunged at Hayes, mechanical arm extending into a blade. Mark tackled the commander. Aside just in time, the blade slicing through his uniform and grazing his shoulder. Predictable, Drex snarled, systems already adapting to the electromagnetic interference. The Confederation always underestimates adaptation. Mark and Hayes scrambled to their feet as Drex advanced. The scavenger's movements were jerky, but accelerating as his systems compensated. The control panel, Mark called to Lara, dodging another strike. Override their command signals. Lara and Patel rushed to the central console, working frantically to decode the alien interface. The remaining team members surrounded Drex, weapons trained on the scavenger captain. You can't stop what's coming, Drex taunted, his mechanical eye whirring as it recalibrated. Earth's isolation ends today, one way or another. What does that mean? Hayes demanded, keeping his weapon steady. Drex's face contorted into what might have been a smile. We're merely the first wave. Earth's reemergence has been noticed by powers far beyond your comprehension. A sudden alert blared from the console. Patel looked up, face pale. He's activated a transmission beacon, powerful enough to reach across sectors. He's calling for reinforcements, Mark realized. Drex laughed, the sound distorted through his damaged vocal systems. Not reinforcements, witnesses. Before anyone could react, Drex activated something on his cybernetic arm. His body convulsed, as energy surged through it. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Multiple tones layered together in unnatural harmony. The Harbingers send their regards, Captain Reed. Earth was never meant to recover. Hayes fired without hesitation, the shot striking Drex in the chest. The scavenger collapsed, but the unsettling smile remained frozen on his face. What just happened? Hayes demanded, turning to Mark. Mark stared at Drex's body, a cold dread settling in his stomach. I think we just met the faction that created the plague. Harbingers? Lara asked, stepping away from the console. I've never heard. Of them, Mark admitted. But if they're connected to Earth's plague... Hayes activated his comm. Admiral, we've secured the command ship, but there's a complication. Drex activated some kind of beacon before we could stop him. Walsh's voice came through, tense but controlled. We've neutralized most of the boarding parties. What kind of beacon? Long-range communication, Hayes replied. And Captain Reed believes it may be connected to whoever engineered the original plague. A long silence followed. When Walsh responded, her voice was grim. Return immediately. Earth needs to know what we're facing. As they secured the remaining scavengers and prepared to leave, Mark examined the transmission logs. The beacon signal had broadcast a simple message in an ancient encryption format, one that predated the Confederation itself. The message, once decoded, contained just 3 words. Earth still exists. The joint Confederation Earth fleet assembled. In orbit was impressive. 17 Earth vessels and the horizon, positioned in defensive formation around the planet. It had been 3 weeks since Drex's defeat. 3 weeks of frantic preparation for whatever might respond to the scavenger's beacon. On the Vigilance command deck, Mark stood beside Admiral Walsh as they reviewed the latest sensor data. The initial hostility between them had evolved into a wary respect, accelerated by the looming threat. Still nothing, Walsh noted, studying the long-range scans. Could it have been a bluff? The Harbinger's message was real enough, Mark replied, and the encryption method dates back to before recorded Confederation history. Hayes entered the bridge, carrying data tablets. Earth's Council has reviewed the complete scavenger database we recovered. There are references to the Harbingers, dating back centuries, always peripheral, always observing from a distance. But what do they want? Walsh wondered aloud. And why target Earth specifically? Mark added. Before anyone could respond, an alert sounded. A young Earth officer called out, "Multiple anomalies detected at the system's edge, energy signatures unlike anything we've encountered." The main view screen shifted to show distant points of light, distorting the space around them. As they watched, the distortions grew, forming what appeared to be tears in the fabric of reality itself. "That's not any Confederation technology," Mark stated, the implicit question hanging in the air. Walsh straightened. "Battle stations. All vessels form defensive. Perimeter Alpha." As the fleet repositioned, the anomalies stabilized, revealing sleek vessels of impossible design, curves and angles that seemed to shift when viewed directly. There were 5 in total, each larger than any Confederation or Earth ship. "They're hailing us," the communications officer announced, voice steady despite the tension. Walsh nodded. On screen, the image that appeared showed a humanoid figure with features so symmetrical they appeared artificial. Its skin had a subtle iridescence, and its eyes contained galaxies. "Greetings, children of Earth. We are the Harbingers of Ascension." The voice resonated with harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. "We have come to witness." Walsh stepped forward. "Witness what, exactly?" The Harbinger's expression remained placid. "The culmination of our greatest experiment, of course." Mark felt a chill run through him. "You created the plague. A necessary trial," the being replied without remorse. "Most species, when faced with extinction, surrender to inevitability. Humanity fought, adapted, survived conditions that should have been unsurvivable." "You killed billions to test us?" Hayes asked incredulously. "To forge you," the Harbinger corrected. "For millennia we have guided species toward their potential. Most require gentle nurturing. Humanity required pressure." Walsh's hands clenched into fists. "And now? Now we observe whether you pass the final test." The Harbinger gestured, and the view screen split to show a separate feed. Thousands of scavenger vessels emerging from hyperspace behind the Harbinger ships. "Drex served us well," the Harbinger continued. "His death was anticipated, as was your alliance with the Confederation." Mark stepped forward. "This was all planned? The scavengers, our arrival, everything?" "The broad strokes, yes. The specific path was yours to determine." The Harbinger's eyes flashed with ancient knowledge. "Humanity evolved on the harshest world we had discovered. A true death world that should have produced only savagery. Instead, It created a species of remarkable resilience and adaptability. And now you've come to finish what the plague started, Walsh concluded grimly. To their surprise, the Harbinger shook its head. No, Admiral Walsh. We've come to offer humanity its rightful place. The view screen shifted again, showing star systems spanning multiple galaxies. The Confederation is but an infant alliance, limited to a single galactic arm. We oversee worlds across the cosmos, guiding species toward ascension. And humanity? Mark asked cautiously. Has proven itself worthy of joining us, not as subjects, but as equals. Your unique evolution on a death world has created capabilities no other species possesses. Walsh and Mark exchanged skeptical glances. And if we refuse this honor? Walsh asked. The Harbinger's expression didn't change, but the temperature on the bridge seemed to drop. Then the scavengers will determine Earth's fate. We shaped you through adversity, Admiral. We can unmake you through the same. As the transmission ended, the bridge fell silent. Finally, Hayes spoke the question on everyone's mind. Do we trust them? Walsh turned to Mark. What would the Confederation do? Mark considered carefully before answering. The Confederation would negotiate cautiously while preparing for conflict. But this is Earth's decision. Your people suffered for their experiment. Your voice should carry more weight. The Admiral studied the tactical display, showing both the Harbinger vessels and the massive scavenger fleet poised beyond them. Then she smiled, a fierce, determined expression that reminded Mark why humans were classified as Deathworld species. Tell your council that Earth is rejoining galactic society, she told Mark. But not as anyone's experiment. We'll meet with these Harbingers, hear their offer, and make our own decisions. She turned to her crew. Meanwhile, prepare all defensive systems. If they think surviving one plague makes us trust blindly, they've underestimated humanity's capacity for both diplomacy and warfare. Mark nodded in approval. 5 centuries of isolation hadn't diminished humanity's defining traits: adaptability, resilience, and a stubborn refusal to yield to greater powers. Whatever the Harbingers truly intended, they would soon learn what the Confederation had known for millennia. Earth might be classified as a death world, but its children were not so easily controlled. As Earth and Confederation vessels aligned, in shared purpose, Mark reflected that perhaps this crisis would accomplish what centuries of separation could not: forge a lasting alliance between humanity and the stars, born not from subjugation, but from mutual respect and the shared will to determine their own future among the cosmos. The Harbingers had engineered a test. Now, they would face one in return. End of Chapter 1.